Happy Monday, November 2nd. We're going to do a little more of this live today, so get ready for, shoot, I shouldn't have done that. Oops, was I recording? And what's next? I changed Brandy's background to a dark alley. We'll see if I get any angry emails this afternoon. But we got Reed Sellers, PPP loan. If your company got a PPP loan, you've applied for forgiveness, might have done it too early. If you haven't, probably a good thing, but you need to check this out. Reed Sellers, Wipfli CPA, so you know what to do with your PPP loan. We also had events in Minnesota, Texas, and Detroit. I got highlights from those. We got a great show coming up. Plus, a new intro, only 30 seconds long. Let me know how you like it. Power 30 starts now.
Hey there, here are your big headlines for the week. Let's start with this one. Prologis sold a UK logistics portfolio to Blackstone for $618 million. The deal included 22 buildings comprising 4.3 million square feet, a new record for Britain. Most of this portfolio is a cast-off deal from the Prologis acquisition of Liberty Property Trust last February. Blackstone, which now has a global real estate portfolio valued at $328 billion, is beginning to rival Prologis in the scale of its logistics investments across the globe. A big difference between the two, Blackstone is comprised of many private equity firms, while Prologis is a REIT publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Avison Young released its third quarter net lease cap rate report. It says the net lease market in general has held up better than the retail market as a whole, but it is not unscathed. The average cap rate across tenant types rose 20 basis points to 6.56% from 6.36% last quarter. The biggest jump came from the bank sector, up from 6.15% to 7.59%. This could be due to a smaller sample size, but it is definitely something to keep an eye on. This chart shows historical single-tenant net lease cap rates versus the 10-year Treasury rate, and that gray line represents the spread between the two rates, which is at its highest point since 2012, signaling that net lease properties are trading at favorable prices. Be sure to register for the RE Journal's Net Lease Conference on November 18th. Registration is free. It can be found on rejournals.com. Greystone, a leading multifamily lender, was just named the largest HUD lender for 2019-2020. Greystone originated and obtained firm commitments for 136 HUD-insured loans totaling $2.59 billion and representing 14.7% market share, topping all other lenders for HUD-insured multifamily and healthcare loans. So congratulations to Greystone. Apartmentlist.com shared this nifty map of U.S. rental market changes. The darker blue represents the hardest hit metropolitan areas, while those more red and orange are actually showing rent growth from March to October of this year. Many of these Sun Belt states are looking favorable compared to coastal markets. Investors in search of fundamentals might want to consider flyover country, but since hardly anyone is flying, maybe y'all can just hop in a car. CBRE confirms its intent to formally move its headquarters from Los Angeles to Dallas, as reported by Globe Street. The move to McKinney Avenue isn't gonna involve moving many jobs from California, though. CBRE told Globe Street it's been growing its workforce in Dallas. This is just formalizing the way it's been operating for years. CBRE joins a host of others vacating LA as rock legend Gene Simmons announces he is selling his home of nearly 4 decades. That's in LA, and was also the set of the show Gene Simmons' Family Jewels, in case you were wondering. Friend of the show, Dwayne Lund, announced that his NAI office was named NAI Global Office of the Year. Given it had only 1 full year of operating under its belt prior to 2020, this marks quite an accomplishment for Dwayne and his team. So congratulations to all at NAI Legacy. We look forward to watching your future growth. All right, Todd.
Josh Schneuker from Seguin tells me how much industrial activity is going on in Seguin and why.
We've seen a tremendous uptick in the amount of food and beverage manufacturing prospects, and having site visits with those folks, even during COVID here. Where we continue to see activity is really on the automotive side of things. That really happened pre-COVID. It was kind of we had a lot of activity picking up as kind of a precursor to the big Toyota expansion that was announced in September of 2019. We were successful with landing a Toyota supplier here in Seguin during that time period, Continental Structural Plastics, and not too far away from Seguin on Interstate 10 in Cibolo, you have Aishin that's building their massive transmission manufacturing facility. But what we're seeing right now, you've got a lot of the automotive suppliers that we believe that are likely going to be working with Tesla, really starting to poke around throughout the San Antonio and Austin region. So we anticipate that that's going to keep us busy, and those are things that we're going to continue to actively recruit to our region, hopefully to Seguin.
This guy, Leo Gomez, I really like. He's killing it in Brooks, Texas.
I'll tell you, food manufacturing has really picked up in steam. Just logistics of products that you find in retail is one thing, but the food side has really taken a bump in our area in terms of manufacturing for operations. And they are making incredible investments, or at least hoping to make incredible investments. And it's really tied back to the surge that we have in interest of opportunity zone investors. And so whether it's logistics or food manufacturing, if they're signing 25, 30-year deals, opportunity zone investors are flocking towards that kind of opportunity. And here at Brooks, we are a designated opportunity zone. And so you might imagine the good rents that it's bringing to the investors that are involved, plus the tax benefits. It's a perfect storm, so to speak, for the kind of development that we need to finish out our light industrial park here at Brooks for sure.
Jonathan Horowitz, a restaurant and hospitality consultant, founder of Convive Hospitality Consulting, explains what is to come for Texas restaurants in coming months.
Is basically the question is to restaurateurs, if things don't change, right? If we don't have significant improvement and people, don't feel more comfortable going out to eat, how likely is it you're still going to be in business in 6 months? That's the question.
Amber Austin from CBRE and I discussed the San Antonio office market.
I think culture is important. I mean, we wake up and spend a lot of time with our teammates, or we don't. I mean, now we don't, but you are in a company and you're working for a company because of the culture, and you really can't grasp that culture like this. So I think, for existing employees that are, drinking the Kool-Aid of the company and know it and understand it, it's sustainable. But for new hires or people that are coming in, I feel like you have to have that connectivity with your employees. You have to have that, kind of mission togetherness. And I think that there will always need to be an element of that, regardless of what kind of company you're in.
Thanks, everybody. Those 2 Texas events we did in San Antonio and Austin are available on our YouTube site. They're marked for which one you want to see by which people. Great speakers, great topic, plus Detroit, plus Minnesota, all the way back to events we've been doing since April online. You can find a lot of good content there. rejournals.com/video replay, or go to YouTube, search RE Journals. You'll find us there. Next up, we got Reed Sellers. This is really important. Pay attention. This is going to be very, very good. Reed and I talk about the PPP forgiveness process, why you need to pay attention, why you might want to wait till next year to do it, why you might need experts in your corner to make sure you don't make mistakes. Let's go, Reed. I'm going to give you a hypothetical. I hope you're okay with that. We got a PPP loan. I'm not going to say it was complicated. It was pretty simple, but I'm not going to say it made a whole lot of sense either. And so we got in, we got the money, and then they changed the rules. So tell me, right now I've received the money. Where am I at, hypothetically?
So you're probably still at a point where you're trying to decipher when should we put in for forgiveness. Assuming that we were really affected by this, there was no issues with our concerns over liquidity, the necessity to take out the loan. Really, we're at a place where we are starting to gather all the info and support that we need to put in for the forgiveness application. Hopefully we have a person that's starting to familiarize themselves with that. We're in discussions with the bank about what they're going to be looking for and that kind of thing, and probably even going through the initial calculation. depending on where we are in this hypothetical situation, did we have to lay off people? That might change some of our response or how we react and the timing of our loan forgiveness application. But we're probably getting real close to the end of our 24 weeks and starting to get real serious about whether we should put in for forgiveness now or in the first part of 2021.
Okay, so there was a lot of stuff in that, and I want to take it one at a time. So right now, in this hypothetical, we owe the IRS, or not the IRS, I'm sorry. We owe, is it SBA?
Bank.
We owe our bank.
Yes.
Okay, so we owe our bank that loan. We do nothing else, we're going to have to make payments on it.
Correct.
And
So
there's some interest rate. Okay.
Yep, 1% interest, depending on when we got our hypothetical loan. If it was before, I think the date is June 4th, we were under the old terms, which meant that we had a 2-year period, a 6-month deferral. Then the Flex Act came out, and the Flex Act said that now you don't have to make any principal interest payments until 10 months after the end of the 24-week covered period, or when the PPP or the SBA remits the forgiveness amount back to the bank. So we are not in a position where we're going to be having to make any payments in the near term, but we may have a 2-year term or a 5-year term ultimately.
Okay, so then let's go back to the first things you said. And you said, assuming that we needed the money. So there's probably a test somewhere that we have to show that we needed the money. Is it really general? Is it really specific? And then who do we report that to? Is that to our bank or to the SBA? How does that work?
So it would be really nice if they had came out with that guidance that spelled out a nice if-then test. Unfortunately, they did not. They never defined what, necessitated a loan, any of those terms. Now, they did come out with, in their FAQs, saying that anybody under that $2 million loan amount is going to be assumed to have made the loan in good faith because entities taking a loan that size do not have adequate access to funds. So in that regard, you should be safe on that liquidity provision. If you are in excess of that, I would plan on laying out the judgment that you had at that point in time. And we got to get in our time machine and go back to March and remember how bleak the economy was, all the shutdowns, all the concerns in the economy as a whole, and document all that. All those things that, they didn't define for us, it has to be left to our judgment. So if we document all that, then they have to question our judgment on it, which is very hard to do if we have it documented.
You said a 24-week period, but we had some kind of it was a 10-week or 12-week. There were some shorter timelines. And had to do some payroll, had all certain of it. Where's that all stack up now?
So initially when we got our loan, assuming that it was again before that early June date, it was 8 weeks. We got a loan for 2.5 months of payroll, but the forgiveness period covered 8 weeks. When the Flex Act came in, it extended it to 24 weeks, and that was an automatic extension. Companies can still use 8 weeks if they want to, but there is the option for anywhere in between 8 and 24 weeks. So, if you're, it makes a lot of sense for most companies to extend it out, because if you're using that 8-week period, you probably weren't going to use all of your loan on just payroll costs. Now, if you extend it out to 24 weeks, you could probably easily cover that loan amount with just payroll costs. So
that's what I feel like. The easy button is just payroll. You've got 24 weeks to meet that payroll, I think. And if you kept your people employed, that's the easy button. So do you foresee most clients will just do that? And
I think so. I think there's going to be some entities out there that maybe did have to lay people off and that kind of thing. So they may get to the point where they have to include some of the other forgivable expenses such as rent, mortgage interest, utilities, and so on. But I think probably those that are in contact with their bank is going to say, look, if you can just provide the support for payroll, that's a little bit easier for us. You're going to get 100% forgiveness with it. There's no reason to include those other things. It's also the rules around payroll are spelled out in great detail. Some of the other forgivable expenses, it's like, well, I think that qualifies, but I'm not exactly sure. When those little judgmental things come in, it's much better to revert back to if you can get it fully forgiven with payroll, it's probably just going to be easier on you.
And this makes a case for using somebody like ADP or Paychex or someone to do your payroll, because they'll just have a report, right? That would be the kind of supporting document?
Yeah, I think even the QuickBooks, a lot of these are kind of setting up reports that will come right out of the system to show, have some of these thresholds like the $100,000 maximum built in and that kind of thing. So that's probably something I would advise everyone. Find out what your payroll can provide in that regard.
I think we can fast forward to the end. Is almost everybody's going to need a CPA firm to just make sure you're doing this right? Because there's so many moving parts.
I think that this is one of those things you probably don't want to get wrong. My fear is that if you turn in an application that even if you inadvertently made a mistake on, the SBA could kick it back and say that you only get 90% forgiveness when you really had expenses that would allow for 100% forgiveness. You just inadvertently made an error. So yeah. I definitely would advise at least getting with somebody that's very familiar with the rules, very familiar with the form, and best practices there.
So I should have asked, is there a copy of the form out now?
Yes. So there is 3 actually forgiveness application forms that you can use. This is another great piece of advice. Use the form that works best for you, because there's one if your loan was under $50,000, it's essentially just a questionnaire. It's very easy. Those are a lot of the small companies and not-for-profits, so very straightforward. The second one is an EZ application. This is the one that a lot of people are going to end up using. Effectively, it says we didn't lay anybody off, we didn't cut pay, or if we did have those situations, we fell under the safe harbor, meaning it was somebody that quit under their own will, we couldn't hire a qualified replacement, or we were under a mandated shutdown by some sort of local municipality, government, whatever it is, that restricted our actual ability to be open. In those cases, you can use that EZ form, and you don't have to go through all these calculations on full-time equivalents, reduction in pay, and everything. So that's a form that's going to work for a lot of people. If you don't fall into those first 2 boats, you have to go to the long form, the full form, where you have to go through all those calculations.
So does the bank have to accept Form 1 and 2? I could see a bank that gets overly worried about compliance saying we need everything on Form 3 because we want to cover our butts. Or is that decision up to the SBA?
It might be up to the bank if they feel that way. I think that it's important for people to have conversations with their bank. You are when you sign that EZ form, you are certifying to certain things, namely that you didn't reduce full-time equivalents or wages in excess of 25%. So you are certifying it, and you're putting yourself up for a little bit of liability there if you're doing that not in good faith. Will the bank come back and say, hey, we'd really like to see payroll records or something like that? Possibly.
Somebody said to me that this may be taxable, and if it is, you don't want to sign it until next year because you don't want to necessarily have it land in 2020 in your lap. So let's address the first thing, because when I first looked at the law, when it came out, it said it was not taxable. But then after that, it gave us some mixed reviews. So what have you heard?
So effectively, it is taxable. To get into the details a little bit, the loan forgiveness itself is not taxable, which is great. Everybody celebrates. I think that's the headline that you read. However, the IRS came back after the fact and said, that's fine. Loan forgiveness is not taxable. However, the expenses that you use for the forgiveness will then not be deductible, which means currently it is effectively taxable. Now, both sides of the aisle and the executive branch have all agreed that that's not what they really wanted. Yeah, they ultimately, got together and said, we don't agree with the IRS's interpretation of that. And, there's a high likelihood that that will get quote unquote corrected eventually. The issue that you pointed out is if you were to put in your application now and for some reason it flies through the bank, it flies through the SBA, and you receive forgiveness in 2020, it kind of sets in motion the timing of that forgiveness. And ultimately, as current law stands, it would be taxable. You'd have to report it on your 2020 books, unless they come out with further guidance, either saying it's not taxable or that you can defer that to the next period. So that is definitely a concern. I honestly, personally don't believe that the SBA is probably going to start rubber stamping these and pushing out any forgiveness in 2020, but I could be totally wrong there.
But for my viewers, I think we would generally give them the advice, unless you have some reason to apply for forgiveness now, you're okay waiting until January 1st.
Yes, absolutely. To get a little bit out there, there's going to be some people that have the absolutely perfect scenario where for taxability, it would actually be better to land in this year because of tax rates and general tax planning says always defer income to the next year, but there are going to be people that land in the perfect boat that it's actually better for them this year. But if you think that you might fall into that boat, you want to do some real tax planning around it. And the real risk is you plan on that and then they change the law in 2021 and it was never taxable, at the end of the day.
If you got a $100,000 loan to make your payroll and you gave it to all your employees and it's taxable, you don't have any money left to pay the tax on that. You've given it to other people for the greater good, for the purpose it was made for. So don't you think, ultimately, I think you alluded to, they probably will get the answer right, but we don't know when.
Yeah, you make a really good point. And furthermore, you're out the Social Security and Medicare taxes, so you're out even more than the $100,000 that you actually paid. Assuming that you truly paid people to just stay at home and there was no revenue on that, yeah, that absolutely will.
What a show. Thank you, Reed. Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, everybody else. Look forward to seeing you next week. We've got more events in Minnesota, multifamily finance. We got great guests coming up. I'm booked out for like 3 or 4 weeks. This is going to be exciting. Hold on to your horses. See you next time.